the changes.
Directors, just 1 minute before we start.
Do you think there's enough time?
Okay.
11? I'm not gonna speak. 11.
What do we do a roll call? Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to commence the meeting. So I'll call the meeting to order at 9:01. And we'll begin with roll call. So we'll turn it over to Shanna for roll call.
Thank you, Chair. When I call out your name, please acknowledge your presence. And those online, remember to keep your microphones on mute. And for some reason, there's a bit of a change in WebEx and I can't see the list of participants on my screen. So people drop off and on. We'll try to monitor that. So we can maybe send me a bit of chat or something. That was great. So we have chair of today's meeting, Dr. Newell,
Present.
Dr. Jackman,
Good morning, I'm here.
Dr. Tierney,
Present.
Dr. Vandenberg,
Hello.
Dr. Watson.
I'm present, and Shanna, I can watch participants for you.
Thank you. Dr. Graham,
Present.
Dr. Cunningham. We have Dr. Cunningham.
See you.
He is not
Dr.
online.
Papa. Sorry? Thank you. Dr. Papa,
I'm present, thank you.
Dr. Hanegraaff,
I'm here, thanks.
Dr. Weatherhead,
Present, thank you.
Councillor Tomas. Tomas?
Good morning, present.
Do we have Director David, our guest Director David up on the line? We're going to move on to staff. General Manager Wall,
Present.
Manager Jeff Gosky,
Good morning.
Manager McDermott,
Present.
staff, and Natalie Neck,
Present.
and Eileen Senate,
Morning, present.
myself, Shanna Ekman. We have Nancy Metz, alternate meeting coordinator. Is there anybody on the line I've not acknowledged? Turn it back over to the chair.
All right, and I'll turn it over to Uli for a moment.
Before we start the meeting, I just wanted to make the directors aware that we are going to have a bit of staffing changes over the next months. Jason has provided us notice, and this is likely second last meeting with us before he enjoys what he likes to do. So if you need to finish up some projects with him, please. The next couple of months is the period that you have time to converse with him. Further, Shanna Ekman has taken an internal position with project management as contract coordinator. So she will be still in the training role for a while, but starting to transition into this position over the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, all the best, Jason, for all the service. Thank you very much. And Shanna, we'll miss you as well very much. Thanks for that update, Uli. We'll move to the traditional lands acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we are meeting today. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? We have
So moved.
Director Jackman, and it's seconded online. Thank you very much. Any discussion, additions, alterations? Seeing none, we'll adopt the agenda as presented. The minutes are there. Is there any comments on the minutes from anyone? Seeing none, those will move to the board. We'll move on now to the item number 3. The water and wastewater systems acquisition plan and evaluation metrics. And we're moving along with this with the second draft, and I'll turn it over to Jason.
So I'll just start with the status, what's left to do. So adoption of this plan, which includes the evaluation matrix, is really about the only thing left to do other than Water Service Committee requested a staffing impact assessment that we'll present in June. there is an existing policy that's outdated we don't need a policy in the plan, so we'll likely just plan so far, just rescind the existing policy because we don't need both. We have some various templates and internal procedures we can develop, but that doesn't need to go to the water service committee meeting. So this current version, second draft of the plan is still just for feedback and comment. Hopefully, water service committee will adopt the plan in June. That's your last kick at the can, because that's when I'm still here, because that's my last day at work. Purposely, I picked that day. From the previous version, we didn't receive any comments, written comments from water service committee. We just had verbal comments from the last meeting. So it was requested that we reference a business case type of service evaluation approach. So we did that in the current version of the plan. We had in the previous version a requirement for 50% community support to proceed with essentially an application or expression of interest. We've now increased that to 75 based on the comment that that's too low. Like we wanted it higher just to show that the community is behind us and that's what they really want. It's not the official vote, but we just want to make sure there's not people on board to proceed with the process. It was also suggested that we this RDCK either lead the that first vote, or have stricter requirements. I kind of went with the approach that is we kind of want to leave it flexible to some degree. We don't want to really prescribe stuff at a high level plan with this, but we did change it that whatever approach taken has to be approved by the regional team. Acquisition process diagram was requested. That's now provided. And I mentioned the staffing impact. The content didn't really change. We deleted a lot. I deleted the timeline stuff because it just wasn't making sense. Because originally we had a strict timeline. You do certain things throughout the year at certain times. Now we're just doing a continuous input. It's going to take 2 years. So it's hard to define a timeline. It just complicates things. So we deleted that timeline and moved some titles around, but it's basically the same content as what you saw last time. Any questions, comments? I included a couple draft brochures just for we don't need approval from the water service committee on the brochures, but we're just showing what we might be producing.
Thank you. We'll take questions, and Cunningham is online. We see you, Director Cunningham. Thank you. And I'll go to it. I just want to say I liked the system transfer and just showing what, as part of the final system transfer, staff will need to develop or complete the following. I thought that was good, just outlining the details that need to be incorporated into the transfer. We'll move to the speakers list. I do have a speakers list. Thank you. Director Watson, Director Graham, and Director Popoff. Director Watson, please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, a few notes on the acquisition policy itself. On page 9, we indicate with a public meeting that it may be supplemented with informal public conversations. And I would not think that that's the best approach when we're needing to be transparent. So I think that either needs a better description of what that means, or that is not how you would go through that public process. And so I'm not in support of that suggestion. And then on page 11, where it indicates the cost of electoral approval process will be covered by the RDCK if acquisition is successful, the service acquires the expense. We don't indicate what occurs if the service is not successful in creation. And so we do need to name where does that come from, and possibly encourage director grants where possible. Because otherwise this ends up in general admin, and it's a good awareness for us to have as we start looking at system acquisitions that we're all picking up that bill if that service is not approved or it doesn't go through the, it's not successful in the elector assent process. So those are my 2 notes on that. On the brochure, I think there was just a fine line around the sales pitch versus the factual information. I know that we're not actually selling the ability to become an RD water system because capacity is always going to be an issue. But I do think that the assets of doing so, and not the tangible ones, but the ethical and drinking water access ones are important to name, but I would just tone the language a bit where it's not so much of a sales pitch. It's not terribly sales pitchy. Jason, can you not hear us? I'm just
Yeah, but my
noticing.
hearing is horrible lately. I'm having a hard time hearing what you're saying for some reason.
Sorry, Chair, can you hear me okay? Is there anything you want me to
Yeah,
repeat?
it's me, I think.
No, I had a little bit problems on item 2 as well, but maybe.
All right, so let's,
What was it, sir?
do you mind pausing for a moment, Director Watson?
Sure.
And we're going to go back. So on the first issue, let's just go a little slower just because of remote. So on the first one, you on page 9, you were saying what?
Or I think it was this one on the very top of page 9. Public meeting might be supplemented by informal public conversations. I believe I got that right, correct?
Yes, the note just being that I don't think that's an appropriate process to include in this.
Correct.
So-
Okay, we will look at that.
I guess just my comment on it.
Yes.
Is, we're not in the formal process yet. Once we're in a formal, like, public assent process, I think you have to have very strict conversations in public meetings, but if people are just inquiring, it's like, you have to be able to sit down and talk to them without calling a public meeting. Like, this is stuff, I think page 9 is probably in the early stages still, or am I mistaken? Like, if it's early stages, like, or they're just inquiring, what's this all about? We can only talk in a formal public meeting. That doesn't necessarily make sense to me, because people are not going to get all the information they want. Or it's a lot more work to have a whole bunch of formal public meetings.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think there is potentially different interpretation, what we meant and what the director feels is expressed here. So what we had typically in past acquisition processes is people with concerns that either weren't at a meeting or didn't get a chance to speak at a meeting or didn't think of the question at the meeting, phoning staff and getting clarification. And I think that's what Jason is referring to, that the occasional person phoning staff members for clarification in the process or what happens after that takeover. But we are open to suggestions what that should read in the plan.
So supplemental to that, Chair?
Yeah, yes, let's get this clear. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think any process we're going through, whether it's the formal one of elect or assent or the initial petition process, the public is always enabled to contact staff and ask questions. So naming it in a policy as an informal process suggests that that isn't always an option. And naming it under the public process suggests that it's not aligning with anybody can contact staff and ask questions at any time. We saw it with the budget, tons of questions coming in. We don't need that name in a policy. But if you're going through the process of determining the first level of engagement from the community and want a 75% buy-in, that needs to be in a public setting that's transparent. So I think what Jason is naming in this is standard practice. And when we name it a policy and it's not in other ones, it makes it seem that it means something different.
I'm just not seeing that we need 2 formal approval processes here. We're creating a second formal process at the beginning.
I think Chair, the Chair will just say something and then thank you for raising this. I think the trap we fall into, and it's interestingly a point raised here, is that if we don't say it, then we could default that we can't talk about it. We can only talk about it at a public meeting. So I think it's interesting how we fall on this. I'm going to turn to Director Jackman for a moment because he's here and he waved his hand. So please go ahead, Director Jackman. We're still on this, the wording that's at the top of page 9, redlined. Go ahead, please.
Okay, and I'm on a different page because I'm looking at not the
Yes.
headline, but immediately ahead of the public meeting heading is the expression of interest submission. So 2 easy fixes here. 1, if we leave that clause under public meeting, we might, instead of saying a public meeting might be supplemented by informal, we might just simply say, prior to the public meeting, there may be informal conversations to frame. So you might put prior to the public meeting there, or you just pull that line out and you put it to the paragraph above, where it talks about expression of interest form. And so in there, you just simply put during the completion of the expression of interest form, there might be supplemental, or there might be informal conversations as required. Either put the informal conversations up in the clause where you're filling in the expression of interest form, or you just put prior to the public meeting, there may be conversations as required. Because I do understand the manager's concern. Jason needs the flexibility to flush out what is this all about before standing in front of me.
Why don't you come meet us at our treatment plant, look at it? It's like, okay, it's not a closed meeting. Anyone with public can attend in your water system.
Yeah.
I don't have to formally advertise this meeting in advance and invite the public out to
Yeah.
come see the treatment plant. Like, that's-
And I would, if I may,
Yes,
Mr. Chair, add to it, for me, important is as well, that might be supplemented. Because if you have a very active public opposed to a transfer, you may be overwhelmed with reasonable or unreasonable questions about that process. And there may be a point where staff says, okay, we discussed that. I no longer entertain further questions to this, right? So as much as it is a normal process for staff to answer questions, there is situations where we say as well, okay, we answered this, we move on, no further, we don't entertain any further discussion on the item. So it goes actually both ways. We you as directors have seen lots of input in the last months that sometimes went well beyond the point of discussion that it was required. And as staff, we do take the freedom and liberty if it is unmanageable that we say, yeah, we have answered that, we move on.
Thank you. So thanks for raising the point. We have debate on either side. I actually, myself, we're not going to, I think it's inappropriate to do a vote on a clause that's in something we're going to vote on. We do have to defer to staff, and I'm hearing staff really feel the need to have outside, either pre or post public meeting, the opportunity to speak to people without reforming another public meeting to formally talk to people about a question that would be raised, and trying to word that. I'll leave it with, at this point, with Jason and Uli and such to look at that line. So your second,
I see during the formal voting part.
oh yeah,
that you
yeah.
Couldn't have its little meetings on the side.
No, this is all forming the thing leading to it. On page 11, Director Watson, please, that's the one where we had a little bit of difficulty. Please go ahead.
Thanks, and I'll just acknowledge Director Jackman's rewording made a lot more sense. So that addresses everybody's needs.
Sometimes I
Um,
missed it.
Yeah, me too. I couldn't figure it out. Yeah, go ahead,
Sorry?
please, Director Watson.
So on page 11, it just indicates the cost of the electoral approval process would be covered by the RDCK. And if it's approved, it goes to the service. What's not identified is where does that fund go? Where does that expense go if not approved? And so it generally goes to general admin. But we should name that in this policy. And I would suggest encouraging where possible, director grants will cover that process if the system is not approved. Otherwise, we're all accounting for the cost of acquisitions. And if they don't go through, we're all carrying that $12,000 per, generally speaking, referendum cost, $8,000 for an AAP. So I just wanted to name, we have to indicate where those funds go if it's not approved. We should all be aware.
Okay, can we just pause for a moment?
I got the content. The question is, under which section would you, under public approval process, public meeting, would you like the mentioning of who manages or where the funds for the public assent process are coming from?
It's already in the document, page 11. It's just completing the description. You have where the costs go if it's approved. You don't have it indicated where the costs go if it's not approved. That's what I'm flagging.
Okay, I see it now. So
Any spending needs to be approved by the board official financial plan. So I don't know how we could identify where the costs are paid from in here. Like it should be done as part of the annual budgets.
Supplemental.
Just give us a second, okay?
Through the chair, not really, because it is potentially approved at the time when we are directed or allowed to proceed with the public assent process. It can be put at that stage, but it would be good to have a general direction. I agree with the director.
I don't know the answer to that, so I need
No,
direction.
no, but that's why we discuss it here with directors, where these funds would be coming from. If it's rural admin, we can pretty well discuss it here. We have, other than Director Davidoff, nobody not be part of this, so we can at a later date bring them into it. Or if it is general admin, then we certainly would need to discuss that at board level if the funds are intended to come from general admin.
Can I clarify?
So what we're discussing now is, so the process, the cost of the process of going to an election is covered by the regional district. So that's the upfront cost. If it's approved, then the system takes on that cost and pays the regional district back. Now, if it's not approved, the funds have been paid, it's now not approved, and it's being, when it says the regional district, is that general admin at this point in time that has fronted the money?
It's not decided in
Sorry,
this
we're
document, and I think
overcomplicating what I'm trying to say.
No, I understand that, but then what you're trying
We
to say
don't need
is.
to name the service. We do not need to name the
No, I
service. That's not what I'm
understand that. I
asking.
understand that, but we do need to name the service if it's not approved. Because the money's been spent
Not
from
in a
somewhere.
policy. Not in a policy. Can I just please clarify?
That's what I was trying to do, so please go ahead. Yes, I obviously didn't understand.
So we're talking about a policy. It is not as prescriptive as when the board has to actually designate where those funds go. That is a board approved process. So if a system is not acquired and we now have an $8,000 to $12,000 bill, the board still needs to make a motion that says, what service does that go to? What I'm asking for to be identified in the policy, we cannot preempt what the board's going to determine on that, but we do need to identify that the regional district as a whole needs to acquire that expense. Where it goes will be up to the board at the time, which is the way our procedures work. So I'm only identifying that we didn't finish the explanation of what happens to the cost. If it's not approved, it then becomes a general expense and the board will determine where that goes. I was suggesting a note that director grants can be encouraged as a way to not bring it to everybody as an expense. But that's just, policy is just setting up, this is where it would have to go. Sorry, this is where it needs to be addressed. The board still determines what service that goes to.
Just give me a second. Go ahead, Jason, and then Julie.
How about we just put it in the plan that prior to proceeding with the public assent process, the board needs to identify where costing would land, whether the vote is successful or not.
That's right. What do you think, Julie?
is a possibility. At the time of approval of the assent process, it could be determined
Where
for a non-positive result, where the cost is carried from, or where it can even be landing right away at a service, and then if it is successful, it goes charged back to the water service. If not, it stays in that service where it originally came from. But it would be a time of approval. I think that's probably the best place to make that decision.
Okay. So
I'm
as part of
sorry,
the
that's not what I'm
approval-
asking. You're then changing the procedures on how we do every other referendum. I'm only
I've
suggesting
had
that you,
policies that do, I'm really a bit confused, Director Watson. We do say in motion, in policy, where funds come from.
just a caution, this is a plan, not a policy, so it's somewhat less restrictive than a formal policy is. So we have more liberties within a plan than we have within a policy.
Yeah. Okay, I'm missing your point, Director Watson. Please go ahead. Hey, what do you want this to say? If acquisition is unsuccessful, if the vote is unsuccessful, you want to say what?
That the RDCK will have to acquire the expense and the board will determine which service it lands in. Simple. I'm just saying you have to complete the sentence.
Just pause. Jason's writing.
But may I?
Yes.
So the last paragraph under service establishment or public approval for service establishment, before we get to public approval process, public meeting, the last paragraph says the cost of the elected approval process will be covered by the regional district. If an acquisition is approved, these costs will ultimately be passed on to the benefiting service. So I thought this covered that already. So is there anything more to that wording that you would like to see in that paragraph?
It's completing it, and if it's not approved, it's acquired by the regional district as a whole as an expense.
Okay.
All right. So Uli was saying it's implied that it's already covered by the RD. You're asking for it to be more than implied stated.
Yeah, I mean, we're writing a plan to be as transparent as possible. And when it comes down to it, when we're looking at system acquisition, I really appreciate the policy and everything we're putting together, the plan, because it's not a cheap process to go through, nor is it a cheap service to potentially engage in. So I'm just trying to make sure we circle back that as we do these, we have to be aware that if it's not approved, we're all picking up that expense. And so I just don't think it's super clear in the way it's written. I'm not looking for us to predetermine, is that rural admin? Is that general admin? Is that a director's grant? I'm just saying complete the sentence so that it's clear if it's not approved, we still have to pay for that.
Yeah. Okay. And Jason, please go ahead.
I think I need to clarify if not covered by grant, because it's not worked out yet, but there's a potential the province might help cover costs for, say, improvement districts acquisitions. And then I don't know if they'll cover that cost, whether it's accepted.
But I don't think we need to get into that detail.
Yeah, you're limiting it. If the vote is not successful, if you say the regional district will cover this cost, that means that grant can't cover it.
Sorry, Jason, that doesn't mean we can't recover the cost through a grant or get it previously.
It's complicated.
Yeah. And your third point, Director Watson.
It's okay, you can move along.
All right. Thank you. Director Graham, please go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. Now I'm afraid to ask my question. It's similar to, and I did also catch the what if the request cancel fails, but my question is on page 9 under the consultant system assessment. I'm a little unclear. Again, the regional district is going to, okay, if ultimately converted the regional district service and if staff time required was significantly more, the regional district is going to be partially covering this. It says RD staff costs borne by the RD or partially recovered. Again, I was wondering if not, like who pays for this? So I've now heard it's the regional district, all of us. So I was wondering from our December 6th meeting, I had a note saying that $35,000 was being put into rural admin. And I was wondering if that is like intended for this in the budget. Because now I'm hearing it might come out of general admin if the whole thing failed. So I'm just trying to wonder, like, how do we have any idea of how much this might be? This is under an assessment. Like, I know you guys, it's been a lot of years since you brought a system on, but like, do we have any idea of how much staff time it takes and what sort of costs we're looking at here?
Yeah, let's, we'll turn it over to Uli. Please go ahead.
Okay. As Jason pointed out at the beginning of this item, we will have the resource portion further discussed at the next meeting in June, where we have that discussion what it likely means to the best of our guesses in regards to staffing requirements for that. It has in part to do with the agreement on how many systems are we allowing into the loop, how large is the system, how controversial is it, and that's where this section comes in that Jason is pointing out. If you have a system where it is extremely controversial and the system asks us for multiple public meetings, at some point we will say this is not covered by the standard that the regional district has established, and you will have to pay for additional process components that are well above what we had estimated it to be. So I think Jason put a stop here to an excessive requests from a system applicant for support.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jason.
It's tough to put a handle on it or number on it because public meetings is gonna involve a lot of RDCK staff. So they're all gonna have like, say, 8 hours, 16 hours just from the meetings, but one person will be dedicated primarily to do these assessments, right? If you have all the information you need, the really good team, like really good public side of it that feeds you the information you need, the consultant report's good. Realistically, I could probably run through and do that evaluation matrix in an hour or two. If all the information is good. The toughest part is getting information and talking to the public, so that's hard to put it on. That could be hours and hours and days and days and days and days. If it's not once.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is a process we have already used for applicants that want to connect to our system. In most cases, already within the service area. But when they were making all kinds of requests and complications, we said, so far to this point, staff has supported this process as part of the cost of the RDCK. From here on in, we feel that the requests are excessive and we will build the staffing cost in excess of this point back to the developer. So there's already an example where we have done this, and I think we would likely come back to this group to say, hey, we gotten to a point where we feel there are excessive requests and to be directed to bill future staffing costs back to the system.
Director Graham.
Thank
carry
you.
on.
Thank you. That was an excellent answer, and thank you for all the work that is done here. And I just have one last supplemental question, which is just regards to the brochures. Is this an either or are we looking at both?
Basically, there's two brochures because I couldn't fit it all on one standard brochure template. So one is basically outlines the process, and then the other brochure outlines the benefits of becoming a RD service. Ideally, yes, it should be one brochure, but I need a different brochure template that allows more information on it.
More to come. You're welcome. So thanks for raising those points. So this process will cost the regional district some money in the process of acquiring. That my question, I will go to you, Director Popoff, but we're on this. So Jason or Uli, a system has now become part of the regional district. And the cost for the election, it was a reasonable process. They were good. They did all their work and what have you. And the election was successful for acquisition. Will the RD have paid out money, other taxpayers that will not be recouped? Uli.
The answer is yes, because we will only recoup the outside of our department work, which is the actual referendum process that is conducted through administration, including any cost for advertisement, room rental, or whatever else there will be. But the staffing cost continues to be carried by the overall service A103, which does, and that's the discussion we will have when we get to the resource portion, does recover some of their revenues from the rural admin. And so that will be the discussion when we have a better picture, how deep we get into the process and what resources are required for the process.
Great, thank you. Director Popoff, great to see you here, and we missed you last week at the board meeting. Please, your question.
Yes, haven't gone through this process once back in 2009. And the first step in the process, and I must have missed something here, but what happens is when you go to a public meeting, the first question that's going to be asked is, how much is this going to cost us? And and the expectation is that they have applied for an infrastructure planning grant, and the planning grant came back as $3 million to bring your system up to standard before going any further. And did I miss that step in the process somewhere? When are we going to, going to the public without the actual costs to the public? It's, everybody wants to be taken over. But until then, what steps do we have to do before that? Maybe it's in the matrix, but anyways, I see Jason had his hand up. Go ahead, Jason.
I believe somewhere in the plan, I indicate that staff will do the consolidated asset management plan, but we also need to look at that too and see whether it's legitimate or not. That asset management plan should be able to tell you how much money you need to put away into reserves annually. So I'll give you that cost, but somewhere in there also have the staff who would draft 5-year budget. So that'll give you essentially your budget and potential rates typically if you're doing the budget.
Right,
To be refined later, but you need that somewhere before, I think, you need to do something before they go to the public vote, formal vote, to have some idea what their rates are gonna be.
And if I may,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
if I may add to that, the more unknowns there are, the more safety we would build into that budget. It's not reasonable that we have a system that has no idea about their pipes, dig up down to every section of pipe to verify what type and what condition the pipe is in order to verify it is, in what condition it is and what the future cost we have to anticipate. So we would build in additional safeties in the overall budget to account for that. Similarly, when there is no clear direction yet on compliance for treatment, then we have to build safety in and err on the side of caution. And so that's what we would do, and that is actually in line with the process what we did previously. I would assume we are more detailed than we were able 15 years ago, where we had a lot less staff and took on 4 to 5 systems a year. So I think we will be a lot better prepared than we were then. But we did even then already create 5-year budgets and went with this number to the public meeting and ultimately into the referendum process, because this referendum process establishes the establishment bylaw, as well outlines a maximum that we can recover, at least from requisition maximum, maybe even from user fee. That's depend how we structure the establishment service bylaw. But we are legally required to put that limit in there, and so we have to have a very good idea what the future cost of the system is in order to establish that limit for the referendum process.
Supplemental, if I may, Chair.
Yes, so just look on. Go ahead, Director Popoff.
Yeah, so, and the process to get there, Leah, is an infrastructure planning grant that some of the water systems have obtained and had a professional engineer do the planning for them, telling them how much their system will cost. And roughly, I'm referring to one particular system, $3 million. Now, then RDCK will take a look at that infrastructure plan and build in the other costs that are required and then go to the public meeting. And at the public meeting, if it's $4 million and you only got 100 water users, it's going to get rejected right there. Is that the process we intend to follow?
Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. So first of all, infrastructure planning grant is one of the possible tools. For most of the systems, this is going to be likely by far not enough to do a proper assessment process because it is limited to $10,000 as a grant matched by $5,000 by the water system. If you have a complex system, like you mentioned with $3 million estimated capital cost, the $15,000 study is not going to provide us the detail that we request from a system like that to have a good understanding of the complexity. So in most cases, systems hopefully choose to do the right thing, do the assessment, and only very small systems rely on the infrastructure planning grant that with it by nature provides a 1 to 2 year delay to be successful in the granting application, getting the grant, and then do the study. So this is one of the tools, but hopefully larger systems or more complex systems have recognized the position they're in, have recognized the financial needs they will have to bring to the table and willingness to pay, and have done an exhaustive assessment through an engineer that allows us to produce good numbers for the future budget.
One last question, if I may, Chair.
Director Popoff, through the chair.
Yes, and from my understanding is an infrastructure planning grant has been applied for, an assessment has been done by a professional engineer, and now to go further, what the regional district would require is another study done by a professional engineer, a more detailed one, and the applicant would bear the cost of that?
Go ahead, Uli.
Through the chair, not necessarily. If the first study is detailed enough and provides the information we require, we will not make them do another study. We may come and say, these are these gaps that should be closed, but we do not insist on 2 studies unless the first one was, like you earlier outlined, a $10,000 infrastructure planning grant for a complex system. Then we say, yeah, that study is not enough. But Jason.
Yeah, Jason has a comment. Please go ahead.
If they
Jason.
don't have an adequate study and they're missing information for us to do the evaluation, they'll get very poor evaluation marks.
There you go, Director Popoff. So in the acquisition process, one of the determinants is how good of information have they provided to the regional district, including reports and what have you. Is there a supplemental, Director Popoff? Before I go to Director Cunningham, just want to make sure I remember I have to go to Director Cunningham. Director Popoff, supplemental?
Yeah, just one last question, and this was, I've asked it twice now, but I don't believe I had an answer. Up to that point, does the water system bear the cost, or does the regional district, through their assessment, bear that cost?
Very likely has to be done by the water system as part of the assessment process. There can be, in very rare cases, an agreement to do further work through the regional district and the cost being built into the budget process. But by far, our normal process and preferred process would be that this is fully completed so it can flow into the evaluation process. Should we have only one applicant system, we may consider doing further steps further on where there is no competition between systems. But generally speaking, the assessment process should be complete and to the satisfaction of the regional district.
Jason?
I guess part of the reason why we decided that they have to have that assessment done is because it shows that they're very serious about managing their system properly. If they're not, if they don't want to do the assessment and just want to put it off, let their regional district care of everything, that's not showing that they're committed to actually improving their system or actually knowing enough about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's components, right? They may have a full system assessment, but no good understanding for asset management planning for their distribution network. And we could say, this is an element you need to do, or we do at a later stage, but that means we by far increase the future rates to have that certainty to be covered for, let's say, 10 kilometers of asbestos line replacement within 5 years. So it is in their interest, the more information they have, the better their chances are to be the chosen system, the better is the quality of the financial plan that we put before them, because we don't have to put as much safety factors on top when we calculate future rates.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That answers my question is, and basically it was, if a system wants that, every system wants to be taken and managed by somebody else. It's generally cost dependent. How much money do they have to spend before we even go to public meeting? And at the public meeting, it gets rejected and we don't have to go any further. Thank you.
You're welcome. Director Cunningham, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I refer to page 9, and two things actually. The first is that we were asking for 75% approval before we even begin the process, tentative approval. I would suggest that that seems to be a little bit high. Everything in the preamble to the community charter says super majorities like that are really not recognized or make anybody too happy. What it does, of course, will mean that probably we won't have to do any at all, because I don't know of any project we've done in the last 30 years where we started out with 75% approval, other than the one in Weimar where the whole town froze up. So I would suggest that maybe we relook that. When we talk about super majorities, I would say we should go no more than 2/3 at any time, and that's the most that's recommended by the preambles and the work done by the community charter. Okay, but secondly, the thing with costs of bylaws and passing I'm going to use the word referendum rather than, and if the cost, of course, now we're talking about acquiring another service, a water system. And the question is, how is financing, the cost of the setup of the referendum for a fire department, where you want to extend the area covered by a fire department. How are those things covered? We have a policy for that, right? And it says, as we all know, that if the service is passed, then they kind of cost come out of service. Otherwise, other than that, the district swallows it. And we used to have a fund for that many years ago, and we were very careful not to start taking on extra services unless we had some kind of funding already set aside for that. We may wish to look at that. That section that says, where the money comes from and where it goes to. I don't know why that's in there, because that's covered in all our stuff with regards to taking over any service. And this is just a service like any other, whether it be dog control or fire departments or any of the other things we do, cemeteries. We have all those services, and going to use community approval systems to set them up. All have the same thing. So I don't know why we should be having anything about that's irregular in our, we don't need to fill in those lines because we already have it in our general approvals. So those are my 2 points, and I'll leave you there.
In regard to the super majority.
I let you first speak, but it is in regards to that point.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I agree with your comments, Director Cunningham. We have an example for that. Woodbury would not have passed the 75% threshold when we went through the process. And I believe the majority of users there are quite happy now that they went through that stage. So you are absolutely correct. The 75% is a big threshold that many applicants likely cannot meet, and a 2/3 process, 2/3 margin would likely be a lot more suitable.
Thank you.
And I was going to comment that I think I raised the point at the last meeting that it should be more than 50%, that was just too fine a line. And so Jason put 75 in, but I think that maybe by just a nod or I'm gonna propose and then wait to hear people scream
Mhm.
that we change it to 2/3, because I think it is a better number. And then see if anyone is super upset by 2/3.
Supplementary chair, if I may. I recall with
Dr. Cunningham?
that in fact, that they had a pressure group that turned the thing down, and then they found out they'd lose, not only lose the grant, they'd still have to meet IHA interior health standards with the system. So the cost was going to be there whether they liked it or not. And guess what? They weren't going to get the grant if they disapproved it. So they had a referendum the second time instead of just an approval process. And of course, it went through, and the Belfast system is what it is today. So, yeah, I think we have to be very careful there, because very often we may be saying what we want, and the other people may be saying, the interior health says, well, listen, don't forget about us. And so yeah, I don't know. I just to point out that these things have follow very funny paths sometimes.
I think thank you for that. If you could lower your hand, just so I know if you have another point to call on you. So we are changing it, he said hesitantly, to 2/3 from 75%. And I don't see any outcry. So, all right, so if you don't mind, Jason, you think that's.
If there's no opposition, yes.
Okay, so staff feel that's okay as well. So thanks for that. All right. So what are we doing now, Jason? You've said this. I have no more speakers.
So I'm asking for written comments back again by what date?
Should be fairly quick, if I may, through the chair, because we have had a lot of discussion. There were relatively minor changes now. So I think we send that out and a week's notice, if the directors are okay with that, to comment further, considering we did have very little comments beforehand.
May head.
Yeah, is that too long? You want to tighten that up?
I think we should, for staff's purposes, so you can kind of go.
Yeah, because you gotta prepare the documents for the next meeting.
We meant to say April 10th, it was a typo. That gives a week.
How about April 19th?
April 19th.
Sorry,
Feedback, if
point
you've
of
got any.
procedure.
Yes, go ahead, please.
My apologies. It's hard to hear you guys when you're all speaking, and so I don't know
Thank
what
you.
you're doing in regards to the
Yeah.
date you just referenced.
Yeah, no, so feedback by April 10th, April 19th. Only one of us is mumbling and bumbling now. April 19th. Okay, thanks very much, staff and everyone, for your input in this. And boy, oh boy, what a complex issue. So I'm going to now go to agenda item number 4, and I'll turn it over to Jason.
Sorry, before Jason starts, I just wanted to comment that I am still owing Director Graham a response to the rates in Belfast. We will have more conversation, and there's a possibility we come back to you with changes in regards to what you see right now, and that's before you to be approved. I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. And I had a question before we go into this, Jason. So we have 2 recommendations that we would then be forwarding to the board. So we're not really adopting, the board is, but we're recommending to adopt.
Any bylaw is through.
So is the wording right? Like, to be adopted? I should know that. I've only been around 10 years and I still don't know if recommendation number 2 can be done by us because we can't adopt it, but recommend it.
I was writing my board reports that the Water Services Committee recommends to the board that the board up. At one point, Angela said to write it as the board, so I don't.
Okay, let's leave it at that.
Angela will hopefully fix the wording by the time it's the board.
Okay, thanks. Shanna,
So Dave, this is the wording that actually goes on the board agenda. So when you're at the board, this is the wording that you will adopt or not at the board level.
okay,
Yeah,
got
so
it.
these committee reports are written with that wording and supporting the standard resolutions index to go directly to the board as written.
Sorry for raising that. Okay, thank you.
Good point. I wasn't sure myself.
Yeah, so we'll just carry on. So Jason, please go ahead.
I'm actually turning this one over to Natalie.
Natalie?
Yeah, so
Natalie's taking over here, so.
yeah, item number
Sorry,
4 is in.
Point of process again.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just don't know what item we're on. Item 4 has no motions indicated.
In the bottom of the report, section 5 has 2 recommendations.
There's nothing on the agenda or in eScribe. And so it doesn't say we're voting on this at all. And if we are, then good to know, but it's not on the agenda as motions.
Or,
Just a sec. Thank you.
Director Watson is correct. I had nothing but problems with eScribe generating this agenda. And even though I blew it away twice and reloaded it, it may not have brought those recommendations forward.
Yeah, it doesn't appear. I hadn't looked at it from that perspective. I had gone straight from the report itself, Director Watson, so. Yeah.
They can raise them, they can put them on the table. You can.
Oh. We can put them on the table.
Yes, I'm sorry, you can do that. I just wanted to be clear about what we were talking about because
Yeah,
I couldn't
thank
find
you.
any motions. Thank you.
Yeah. So we are now at the utilities, fees and charges, number 4. Natalie, please.
So item number 4 is in regard to the changes to the utility rates, fees and charges bylaw. So this year was relatively minor changes, just the usual rate increases that are mostly related to inflation or upcoming capital projects. The only sort of major change in the text that's worth noting is that we have changed wording for a disconnection and a reconnection, which generally was a charge where people, if they go on vacation, they can choose to suspend their billing and have their water turned off. But it was confusing because people also thought it was perhaps a physical disconnection. And so we've changed that wording from disconnection and reconnection to activation and deactivation, so that it's clear it's about the account and not so much the physical connection. And again, yeah, we recommend that this go to the board for adoption. If there's any questions, go ahead.
All right, so we've got chat monitored, we've got hands being monitored, we've got speak out if you want to, monitoring about the rates, and just to ask Uli, if we approve these rates and then something changes at Balfour, we'll just hear about it at the board meeting.
We will hold off on the billing process for this specific system until we have clarity, and then we will bring it forward to the board if changes are required.
Thank you. Jason, did you want to?
Hopefully you don't hold off very long, because then you're overlapping billing periods, it becomes a nightmare for finance.
Okay. So
You end up issuing bills, the next quarter bills before other bills due. Overlapping. A nightmare if we don't have this draft up in the board meeting.
all right, so we're recommending the board approve these rates, and there may be a change, but Jason's pointing out it better be done soon if there is any change. And we do have a speakers list. I see a hand, so I'll start with Director Graham because we're talking about Balfour, and then I've got Cunningham and Vandenberg. And Weatherhead. So,
Director Weatherhead was before me on the speakers list.
Pardon me?
Director Weatherhead was before me on the speakers list in chat.
Oh, in the chat too, great. Okay, Director Weatherhead, thank you, Director Graham. Director Weatherhead, please go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. I was going through the increased percentages on this, but then later on in the agenda, I'm looking at the utility rate summary. And so I guess I'm just finding, I'm getting a lot of complaints from Burton. And so in reading all of this, I was just curious as to the 15% as opposed to the 6% or the 10% or the, all these different percentages. Is there, I'm concerned for the sake of this percentage being so high. So just a question on that. And I won't unfortunately be at the board meeting, so we'll hear the end result to that.
Do we do these offline or
The discussions?
yeah, like when the director has a rate question, or can we do it?
Yes, the director can always contact us and discuss this.
Sorry, I mumbled and I shouldn't have. My apologies. I was asking staff about directors' particular concerns. What are the best processes or what are available? Directors can call staff, but it's available at this meeting as well. So rather than belabor it, I'll just say, do you have an answer, Jason?
And in brief, Burton is one of the systems that struggles with a total replacement of asbestos lines over the future years. And that's the main trigger for the cost increases that you're seeing at an already relatively high level.
Yes, and go ahead, Jason.
I think possibly around last June, I presented some stuff on what the rates would need to be if we replaced all the linear infrastructure, and some of them were upwards of $15,000 a year for single family dwellings. So there needs to be some major decisions made here if you want to start capping maximum increases per year, or do we need to start going after, move towards that 15,000, or just say that's not a possibility? So I think staff overall needs some general direction on that eventually if we're having a debate about how much percent rate increases we're doing each year.
Right, so there could be particular reasons on the asset management plan side of things that's leading to a 15% increase and or raise. Supplemental, Director
I
Weatherhead.
guess 15% is way low compared to what the asset management plan says you need.
Yeah, right. But trying to semi-aggressive. Go ahead, Director Weatherhead, supplemental.
Okay, thank you. Supplementary then, I mean, how is it explained to the public in their notices then when they get these increases that it would be an asset management? Because it's interesting. I mean, the public would need some education on why they need their asbestos pipes possibly mitigated, because they're really not understanding the need for that at all in Burton. And so I'm thinking that perhaps it's just going to require some kind of, public education. And it's, I feel like I'm repeating myself to people all the time that this is the cost of this service. So if you can enlighten me, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, please.
We recognize and will try as much as we can accommodate for it. We recognize the need for these systems that are starting to be well over the $2,000 limit, to have public meetings and have that public discussion to raise the understanding for the situation they are in and the limited options we as a regional district have to help them. So to explain to them again the situation about standalone service budget, the expected deterioration of asbestos pipe and need to replace them in near future if we want to maintain safety in the community, safe water supply, as well as the risk from busted asbestos pipes. And so, yes, we recognize the need. We will work as much as we can to organize public meetings for these communities where we have continued significant, or call it massive, increases of rates proposed in our 5-year plan. So, yeah, that's all I
Okay,
can say.
so thanks for the point, communication noted, and to help the users understand the complexity and the reality of their system. The supplemental, Director Weatherhead?
Yes, thank you. Just another supplemental through staff or through the chair to staff. Does it make any difference if this system, because there's only 54 users on it, would it make any difference if it were a chlorinated system to the cost to this community? I just wondered about that because I know that the community was quite attached to it not being chlorinated, but if the cost looked a lot differently, I'm wondering if they may feel different about that.
I don't see anybody jumping up, so I guess I answer that, no, it would not make a difference. So the chlorination issue would be only coming into play if other treatment systems would be required, like UV or filtration, in order to make up for the lack of chlorination, which is not the case. We have a risk management strategy in place for this system that the board has approved, the newest directors have approved, that allow them to act largely without treatment. So they are already on the treatment side at the lowest cost level possible. This is strictly an issue of our asbestos lines. There's a small component from the wells that we had to address, but generally speaking, it's the distribution system upgrades that will be the driver, a major driver for the cost.
Yeah, Natalie,
Thank
please go
you.
I
ahead.
just wanted to come back to your first point where you asked, how is this being communicated? And forgive me if you already know this, but we do provide the rate increase letters with a brief explanation specific to the system as to where the rate increases are coming from. And then I field questions from the public via the phone, you know, and we record those. And then if those add up, that's when we would start considering.
And we found in the past experience that those letters need to be clear and concise and simple as possible.
Right.
Otherwise, it just confuses people even more if they're trying to put too much detail on them. If they got questions, they'll call, which I've only had 3 contacts so far this year.
Yeah, it's been quiet.
It's been really quiet.
Thank you. You okay, Director Weatherhead? No more supplemental? Very good. Okay.
Thank you.
Director,
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And of course, yeah, as always, with communication with staff as possible. And Director Graham, please go ahead.
Thank you. And through the chair, I've had significant inquiries from both Grandview and Balfour, and I have written to staff, so they're aware. I'm glad the letter came up because my first question to staff is, in the letters that you sent out to Balfour and to Grandview, you're mentioning that the first block is up to 50 cubic meters. And I'm wondering if there's been a change, because when I look on the report, it says the first block is up to 100 cubic meters. And I've had several residents ask me about that, and I said I would check.
I thought Balfour was 100 cubic meters and 150. Yes. Yeah.
Staff are just checking.
Okay, because the letter to Balfour did have the first block was up to 50. And I had residents now thinking that their 19% increase with their 5% parcel tax and 14% overall is going to affect them after 50 cubic meters. So maybe that was an error.
Yeah, they're just checking. Thanks.
To
Just
confirm, the bylaw does say for Balfour 100 cubic meters, Grandview is 50 cubic.
Okay, so then our letter that we sent to Balfour had an error in it. So that might be something that we need to discuss or figure out how we communicate with the users. I also did have, again, the people that are contacting me about these 15 and 19% increases are saying that these are just vastly outpacing their costs, the increases for everything else. And they're having a real struggle. And in the case of Grandview, they had a 15% last year, a 15% this year, and a projected 10% next year. It's 40% increase in 3 years. So I understand their concerns.
And we do as well, we all do. I don't know that staff, again, Willie might have a comment.
Yeah, I'm in the process. I have written half of the email to Director Graham already on this issue. So hopefully later today or tomorrow, I'm able to finish this off and send that to you with the options, because Belford does have options in comparison to others. We can slow down in Belford if intended, the replacement of lines to some degree, but be aware that there is as well different groups within the community with different opinions or different service levels, even in regards to fire services and not. So the more we slow that down, the more the progress for receiving insurance reductions through hydrants is slowed down, and you continue on with a larger amount of the community not having that service. So that's difficult decisions to be made. We'll put that to a large degree in my email, and then we should follow up in a personal conversation what the options are and where the director's preference would be to go with in regards to this, and then it would come to the board for decision making.
Because
Jason, go ahead.
because they're metered systems and I haven't actually figured it out. I'm suspecting the median customer of both those systems pay probably on the lower end compared to all our other water systems. So I think Aiken, Belford, and Grandview have pretty good rates compared to others. But I don't know that for sure.
So
Yeah,
through the
no,
chair, so I don't know the process here, but I don't want either one of these increases to be pushed forward at this point until I have the discussions that I have already written to staff about. And that's my point, if that's okay.
Process wise,
So you have to recommend something to the board. I mean, you would have to redraft the bylaw if you want to leave Belford out of this. I recommend that we leave Belford in and come then, ideally before the next board meeting, even with an alternate solution discussed with the director.
It's gonna be a mess for billing.
It is what it is, Jason. To some degree, we created the mess, so we have to work through this. But
We should be recovering that staff time.
Jason, it's not the right comment now, please. So we need to work through this. I have the communication with the director, but I suggest that you recommend what is before you to the board, and then we go from there.
so we'll leave it as the sense of placeholder, because we do need something, and they do need to pay something, and it does need to perhaps go up. And we're not going to referendum to see whether we have 50% of the people approving or disapproving. And people do go to directors and say, boy, that's a bit of too high an increase. And as Jason pointed out, they're metered system, and it is complicated. So the recommendation, the chair is not going to entertain individual changes of that percent and not include Balfour and Woodbury, Woodland Heights, no, Grandview. Yeah, Grandview at this point, but there's, as Uli said, the director and staff will try and come up with something by April board meeting, which means the week before that. So in the next few days, there'll be a discussion on that. Supplemental, Director Graham?
No, that's fine, because I did already write to staff, so this isn't anything like new. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Nuli's partway through drafting a response, and Jason's pointed out the complexity of the issue and what have you. So
I think we would say to wait till the board meeting, which would be.
we're going to try for the next board meeting, and this report is going to that as it stands. And if there is an amendment to Balfour and to Grandview, then that is a simpler process, at least at the board level of altering the report, the bylaw, and the recommendation. So with that in mind, and I believe Director Graham has said that's complete. Director Vandenberg, please go ahead.
One thing to add.
Oh, Nat, yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to say, if it doesn't make it through the April board meeting, then we will need to communicate to customers that their bills will be coming late, because I'm preparing the data this week and next for billing.
Okay.
It's a kind of a long process, and so, yeah, it just. Late.
Okay, thank you. All right. Let's,
Can I go on the list following Vandenberg?
yeah, and Cunningham and, yeah, so, and we have Jackman. Okay, Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Echoing the comments of Director Weatherford and Graham, when you look at the increases, the numbers are somewhat shocking. And I caution that we just are accepting of this sort of thing. I think the opportunity, to Director Weatherhead's comment, is missed. The continuity of this discussion started a while ago. But in this report, so if somebody new is coming online to see what their fees are, there's no way that they can understand the context, because previous reports, previous discussions have not been noted on this report. It would have been the first thing that I would have gone to, is a previous to look at the technical, the reasons why some of these numbers are increasing. But that's missing. And so as directors, we're getting calls on why this, why that. And then we're fumbling around trying to figure out, well, where did we see those reports? That should have been a part of this report. It's an opportunity to provide the context for this discussion. The people that are paying these bills need to understand where it's coming from. And I'm just pointing out that I think this is an opportunity missed by not having it linked to this series of discussions, a previous report. Thank you.
Thanks. And my first thought is that there's probably been 20 reports that have led us, and this conversation, this exact conversation that we're having about fee increases, is the 7th year in a row that the exact same conversation is had with the exact same concerns, and we still have the exact same underfunded system. So it's a real dilemma for directors and everyone and staff, from my recollection, to get our heads around the massive underfunding of the asset that we are now embarking on trying to rectify. And each time that we slow that process, rightfully so, like, because it's so expensive, we are just moving that process downstream from my perspective. In regard to the report, Director Vandenberg, I would like to ask some clarification on, I didn't quite, before I asked staff to comment, could you help me? I just don't quite understand. I don't, maybe staff does, what more information you would have wanted in the report. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I just don't quite understand fully understand what you're asking.
Right, no problem. The comment was made that I think Director Graham had mentioned that I had to go back to our previous meeting to do a little bit more of the research familiarization. And I agree that if I think back to the previous meeting or meetings, we've been having this conversation. This conversation is evolving. My point to go back to a previous meeting. This report
Just so you know, you're Kelly, Director. Sorry, Kelly, Director, you are freezing on us. So could you dump your video and start again? And then
Right. Maybe that this is a little bit better. My apologies.
Yeah, that's,
My point is that the opportunity is context lost. How to gain that context is the reference to previous conversations, previous meetings that would help to frame. This report is talking about shocking increases. Okay, well, that's based on good information. But what's missing is where that information is available for people to look back to. There's the opportunity missed.
thank you. Okay, thanks for that. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but thanks for clarifying. Jason and then Uli.
I won't be here next year, but maybe a recommendation that a copy of the rate driver letters be attached to this report next year. Show what the public got, what the public saw. The summary has text that staff sees, that wasn't written. That might get tweaked a little bit by how it makes the rate driver, so we didn't want to include that text for the drivers increasing in the summary. So we should include the actual letters that go to the public.
Thank you. Go ahead, Natalie, and then Uli. Go
I
ahead.
also thought perhaps we could just add the text from the rate drivers underneath each system in the, the initial list there. Just for context.
Thank you.
One caution, if I may, as we pointed out before, that the rate driver letters are very slim. They have very limited information on it, and for good reason. So if even a part of the discussion that we have had with directors on that issue is meant to come across, then we have to either attach all reports or at least reference where the general public or directors can find these reports.
Or join the CAC.
And that will still not capture the essence of the discussion that we have had with the directors. So we're a little bit in a conundrum. There's a lot of information here. There's 19 water systems that we manage. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of different rate drivers. They are not always the same. Yes, for a majority, it is line replacement or asbestos line replacement as the main trigger. That we can form in a bit of a general comment, but it is very difficult to replicate the detailed discussion and information that we had in previous meetings. But what we can do is make a reference to previous meetings with a date where general public then can find the agendas that detail these reports out.
Yeah, and we've got them all in eScribe if we can, find what meeting it happened to be. So thanks for the comment. Are you okay with that, Director Vandenberg? All right, I see your thumbs up. You're back on the video. That's great. All right, Director Cunningham, then Director Jackman, and then we've got a few more.
Had seconded Watson first time.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So Director Cunningham, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 items. First of all, of course, we have the new provincial regulation that says we should be allowed to put 2 dwellings on single dwelling lots. That 7.2, is that basically is that to refer to that new legislation, or will it cover it? That's my first question. I have 3 altogether.
Oh, stop. Okay, we'll deal with that. I'm gonna do them in Syria. 7.2.
Yes. It's Schedule A, page 405, 7.2, page 72 on my listing.
I don't know what it is.
I could read it here. Capital infrastructure charge for each additional service dwelling unit in a multiple dwelling parcel development after the initial dwelling unit and capital infrastructure charge for each service, commercial, industrial, institutional after the initial.
So we're not changing anything, are we?
No, we're not changing it. My question is, you've seen the thing with the new provincial regulation that says any single dwelling lot now has to be able to allow another one, or in other words, we have to change our zoning so that we can. And that's on our agenda, I believe. In any case, my question is, with section 7.2, the section that will allow that kind of thing to happen from a water perspective?
Yes, there's so far from a water system perspective, we don't. limit a second dwelling on a property unless the system has a capacity concern.
Okay.
We haven't been yet, to my knowledge, not allowed one. So, or if it's water quality, there's an issue. Like if there's water quality or more water, we can't permit them to necessarily add another dwelling necessarily.
Well,
Your next question?
okay, my second question is section 7.1. It has to do with boundary extensions. And I'd like to point out section R, Weimer Water System has a boundary expansion of 22,000. That was expressly forbidden by the engineer when the system was designed, and it's been in all our stuff for years. Can we just remove that or say none allowed or something for that line? Because basically what we're talking about is system capacity. And when the engineer designed the Weimer system, he says, your capacity is this much, your outline in red on the map, that's all you're allowed. And so therefore, and of course, since we already have a frontage tax, anything within the red line already pays frontage tax. So indeed, that section would not apply to Weimer anyway. Can we remove those words that say 20, just remove the 22,000 and say none allowed?
Can you email staff and we'll,
I think I have the section. So I think the reference is to in the Schedule A, 7.1, letter R, Weimer Water System, $22,000 charge for capital infrastructure charge for addition of a new parcel to a service area and bringing land into a water service area by lot line cancellation or lot boundary adjustment.
Yeah, and you can't do that in Weimer. Yeah, in Weimer, everything inside red already pays the frontage tax. Okay, so they're already included, and everything outside that red is just not allowed. So we can't have a boundary extension.
yeah, we got
I don't
the
know if that's been on the rates table or not. It has to be on the kind of stuff from that.
Yeah, just, okay, and my,
just email Jason and we'll see. We're not going to do it at this meeting right now, but do email them. And your third one, that's a good point though. It's just, we can't do it here. Third point.
okay, well, I mean, I don't know why not. Okay, and the third
Well,
one
we
has to do
won't
with,
do the expansion this year, so.
well, I know, it's not a question
Trying
of,
to do it on the run is difficult.
it's just the question of changing the rate to 0 because it's not
Yeah,
going to.
but then we got to vote and blah, blah.
I think you probably have to add text in the bylaw to clarify that.
Yeah, so we're not going to do it at this meeting, but it points there, so.
Okay, and my
The
third one. Oh, yeah, the third item is actually for Director Weatherhead. Burton was to system when they did the thing in in the 60s. Hydro actually put in Burton's water system, and they put it in the cheapest way possible using kind of concrete asbestos pipe. And I think when you're speaking to your people, you can explain that Hydro decided that they didn't want it, and they gave the system to the district. And of course, we've had to battle all these things, the kinds of things you're talking about ever since. We'll come to an end, but I wish you the best with it. I'm finished, Chair. That's it.
Thank you. If you don't mind putting your hand down, that way I'll be clear that the next time it goes up, you're wanting to speak. Director Jackman, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. This is maybe in my mind, a communication piece and ties in a bit with what Director Vandenberg was saying. Every budget year, I hear, let's not raise it so much this year, but we know we have to catch up. So we'll go 4.8% this year, and then we're going to go 15, 10, 10, 10. We're going to go whatever down the road. So for every director who's getting a pushback, people are saying it's shocking, it's 15 or 16%. If you look at your previous capital plan, you might see for Balfour that they had already been told that last year, when the budget came out, and we said, oh, we don't raise it too much, that the next year be 8.4, and the subsequent year would compound an additional 13%. So it's the difference between that still might be shocking, but the message has been there for years. If we go to Grandview, they were told last year, this year's jump would be 11, and then another 11 compounded. So yes, 16.5 is more than 11, but the message has been on the page year after year after year that if you get away with a little increase this year because it's too much this year, it's going to jump double digit over and over again. So I've always just said that to my constituents. I said, what are you telling me that you didn't see this coming? We've been telling you for years, if we minimize the increase this year, because this is a bad year, you're gonna see double-digit increases in subsequent years. So that's my communication piece to residents. You're not surprised, you're not shocked. It's not exactly the number we played with before, but you knew that you have a substandard system, and eventually it's gonna go up substantially. That's the easiest message we can project as directors, and not leave that to staff. Because face to face, when I tell people that, I say, didn't you read the second, third, fourth year out? Did you ignore all those numbers? And the water systems are closer than any other service for future year projections, because we did start capital asset management plans a decade ago. You'll see some of our fire services kind of flatline, and you say, well, that's not realistic. There's a big truck in there somewhere. So we're not on track, but the message has been consistent. It will go up, it keep going up, because regulations are tightening and your system's degrading. And the convergence of those two is more money.
Yes, I've got 3 staff responses.
If I may add to this, I think important is different from most other systems. Balfour is actually a success story. It is, even with these rate increases, a positive news story. When we took this system over, he had no treatment. The treatment that was implemented was very limited and limited development in a community that, when they came to the regional district, promoted that internal growth of that system will actually pay for future development, which was unreasonable to begin with, because there was not the amount of water there to do additional growth. Since then, we have had a new and enlarged reservoir. We have, assuming the wells at Queens Bay will be successful, significant additional water supply. We have allowed significant additional development in that community. We have replaced sections of asbestos pipe in that community at a faster pace than most other water systems that we have, if not all other systems. And we are in a situation where we have enough contributions to reserve that allow us a reasonable continuation of line replacement. Plus, the system is at a cost level that we normally see only with water systems that have well only. They are in competition with West Robson and Duhamel systems that have wells only when you look at the absolute cost of this water system. So for me, this is the last system I am afraid to have a communication with the public, because for me, what we have achieved in this particular water system is a good news story. And I think it is important to portray these achievements instead of dwelling on a percentage increase that is overall on a dollar amount lower than a lot of other systems that are already at a $2,000 level and more per year, without any treatment, without any achievements, without any positive news that we can share with the residents. So I think sometimes we need to step a little bit back and look at the overall achievements of a system and get the message out there. That I don't want to take anything away about the concern that Director Graham had in a different rate or percentage that we, not different rate, but percentage that we have communicated to her in the budget process. That is one that we as staff need to clean up. So I'm not taking anything away from that, but overall, Balfour is a very good news story.
Thank you, Jason, and then Natalie. Go ahead, Jason.
One thing to add to what Director Jackman was saying earlier. So when we did part of the analysis I looked at last year with the rates, with the water line replacements, is if we would have took our asset management plan seriously 10 years ago and raised rates then, our systems would be sustainable likely now at a lower rate than we're paying now. And we have no solution currently that's even feasible with the amount of rates we have increased because we have all these replacements now failing that. We should have been 10 years ago, we were doing stuff 10 years ago, like, oh, we're doing a $0 rate increase for you this year because you guys seen too much rate increases over the last 20 years. So we're not increasing rates. We should have 10 years ago addressed it. Seriously, the more every year you delay, the worse it gets.
Thank you. Natalie.
Yeah, I would also like to add what Director Jackman said, and I think it is important, Balfour aside, not to beat around the bush. The reality is the systems are not financially sustainable, and these increases are not going away. So it's a reality that everybody has to face, and focusing on the achievements while also communicating that message, I think is important. That's my way of doing it when I speak to customers.
Users. And from the red line document changing to the word user.
Not approved yet, Chair.
Not approved, sorry. We are not users yet officially, but we're getting there. Thank you very much. Thanks staff for that. Thanks for the question. Thanks Director Jackman. And now I'll move on to Director Watson. Please go ahead.
Hi there. Just a note that these rates were already approved through the financial plan. So not to say you can't make changes, it will require financial plan amendment though. So generally the water rates and utilities bylaws come the month after we've approved the financial plan, which any of those, what you want in 2024 is generally determined in advance of that financial plan approval. Things happen, people are busy, these are big times, lots going on. So I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm just highlighting that there is a step also involved if certain water systems are not moving on with these, that they will have to also then amend the financial plan.
Thank you. Very good technical point. And Director Weatherhead. Go ahead, please.
Thank you through the chair. Just to roundabout back to the communication piece, and I take note that, and yes, Director Cunningham, I do actually speak about the BC Hydro history a lot around here. And also I noted Director Jackman's comments. On the communication considerations that as mentioned in item 3.6, that budget meetings have been held with all the respective water commissions and CACs. So now what I have found is that I'm having real difficulty getting Burton and Fauquier on board to have a CAC, whereas it's been really successful in Edgewood and they so appreciate their CAC. But what I understood was there was an advertisement that went out. Can we be putting some kind of advertisement in these rate increase? This might be a really timely window to be able to gather people that might want to sit on that CAC. If they're the ones complaining about the rate increases, they might be the ones that would join. And I keep speaking to it, but I'm not getting any, anybody taking any takers.
Yes, Natalie.
We do have a plan to put that into the billing inserts actually to advertise for CAC members. And next year I can make a note if we want to add it to the rate increase letters as well.
Great, thank you.
And that's kind of my feeling too, like why should we spend an hour talking to each really concerned customer about rate increases when you should be on the CAC committee?
Yeah.
And there's not very many, like you only talk to a very small minority, like I've only talked to 3 customers this year about rate increases. Usually it's way more than that. These people are concerned enough that maybe they should be on the CAC or commission.
Yeah, okay, well, let's, I see, are there more speakers? I don't think there's any more speakers on this. We've got 2 motions that are going to be the exact wording that goes to the board.
They're in the chat.
Oh, there is Graham, Director Graham, please go ahead.
So thank you through the chair, and I appreciate all of the information from other directors on handling these rate increases, because I know you have more experience, and I appreciate all of that. I do have to say I learned a hard lesson this year, and that was that I need to be at the CAC meetings. I let these ones go ahead this year and I was away. So that was my learning for myself. But my notes from the CAC meeting from Balfour had said it would be a 6% increase, and then now that I've got a 14. And I just want to say that we're in very unusual times. We're dealing with grocery prices going through the roof. We're going through high interest rates. So while I can appreciate the other directors saying, you know, like, oh, well, if we don't increase it now, we'll increase it later. But like, I'm really hoping that we start seeing some of these costs, like our interest rates, coming back down to more affordable levels. And I have a very high percentage of seniors, and they're seeing a 4% increase. And when I ask them for a 19% increase on water, it's just not a tolerable thing for them. So I just want other directors to be aware of that too, and the realities that people are really facing out there under the circumstances of today. So that is just my closing comment, and I look forward to working with Uli and the team in regards to the email that I had previously sent. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so do we have to move them separately? In committee, Shanna, can we move them together?
Yes.
Can I have a motion to move both recommendations?
Recommendation of 3 reading and the recommendation of adoption. Go to the board.
And that goes to the board, so that's in order. Is there a seconder? Looking around, I see a seconder. Is there any discussion? Sorry. That's, I laugh only because we did discuss it, but of course, there's always
Point of process.
opportunity for discussion in process. So Director Jackman.
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anyone else? I hear Director Watson. Please go ahead.
I was just going to let you know if you're calling for discussion when you have adoption and a blocked motion, you can't discuss it. You have to separate them. Just a procedure thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. That's a really good point. So we can't discuss it because it's moved as a block.
We're in committee.
But we're in committee, which would allow some flexibility because it's the board that adopts. We're just asking the board to adopt. So if there is discussion, the chair will accommodate that. But seeing none, I'll request, is there any opposition? Director Graham. So we've got one in opposition. So the motions pass, and we will see what comes to the board in a couple of weeks. So those motions pass. We've now completed it. It's over. Jason has a question.
So for clarification, do we edit section 7.1 on the Weimer rate or not?
No.
Yeah, we can easily start taking notes now for next year's bylaw.
Yeah.
No one's gonna apply on that with any.
No, that won't be, and we'll deal with it. We have the information, so if someone applies, we'll just say no. So it's all good. Thanks for that, Director Cunningham. All right, we'll take a quick pause for 10 minutes. We'll be back at, let's say 5 to 11. Thanks everyone for that discussion. And we'll mute.
They just moved into the block.
If I get that.
So they can set.
Yeah.
Okay, we are unmuted.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are very close to recalling the meeting to order, so we're just wrapping up a couple of conversations here, so stand by. It'll Jason, you're gonna do five, well, we're just about back. I just clarifying, you'll take on
Unless
five.
Alex wants the Erickson meter rebates.
Yeah, I could take that on if you wanted to, just because it's a bit more.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back in order. We've reconvened and we're now on agenda item number 5, and I'll turn it over to staff. And whichever staff speaking to it, please tell us who you are.
Thanks, Tom. I'll speak to it.
Okay, Alex, go ahead, please.
So Erickson Phase 1 metering project is commencing this year. We're in the stages of procurement currently, and we will be doing some installations later this fall. This report is to discuss the meters that were required to be installed because of development requirements. There's various reasons that I won't go into, but some of these properties have had to install meters within the last few years that do currently qualify for meter installation under the Phase 1 parameters. Those parameters are the agricultural sectors that have 5 or more acres of irrigation privilege, and then the ICI, which is industrial, commercial, and institutional properties. Staff is through this report, and I do apologize, I didn't write this report, so I'm half reading it, learning it as we go, but I do know the gist of what's going on here. We're seeking direction from the Water Services Committee on how, if and how we approach potential reimbursement for the charges incurred by these 13 properties, is that right?
4.
Sorry. These 4 properties. The options that we've pondered, a full refund on actual amounts paid for the metering, less administrative costs. Option 2, future rebate up to the amount of metering, up to the amount metering would have cost if completed under Phase 1. Option 3 is a rebate up to a fixed amount, or option 1 if less. And option 4 is do not provide any refund or rebate. The estimated cost for metering and backflow installation under Phase 1 metering project is as follows: for a 1-inch meter and backflow preventer. So the backflow preventer are a little bit more pricey as they're the double check valve assemblies. And this is, as you can see, I won't go through the figures, but there's the 1.5 inch and 2-inch meters, backflow assembly, and installation costs there. This is a detailed report, Jason. I think I will go down to the 2 options staff has selected there. Option 1, so this is section 4 for this Water Services Committee to consider. Option 1 is that the Regional District Water Services Committee recommends the board direct staff to provide meter refunds to water customers. The 4 accounts there that do fall under these parameters for Phase 1. For the actual costs they incurred, less administrative costs, those figures are detailed in the brackets. Or option 2, that the Regional District Water Services Committee recommends that the board direct staff to not provide any metering refunds. And I will open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you. So, Scour, I don't see any.
There's,
Are you on chat?
Vandenberg and Watson. Cheryl, Director Graham was in 1038, but I think you got her. But since then, we have Vandenberg and Watson.
Okay, and Director Weatherhead, your hand is up. Are you wanting to speak to this as well? Okay, thanks. So we have Dr. Vandenberg, please go ahead.
Great, thank you through the chair. I'm going to turn my video off as well. So the question after reading the report in my mind is this a rebate or a refund? Because to me, those are two totally different things. I think when I read through the report that there was extra money as a result of installing, there's a surplus of money. And so the question is, do those four accounts get that surplus returned to them in a form of a refund? Can you clarify that, please, for me?
Jason, go ahead, please.
I guess the report is overly complicated because I was trying to cover all the options that staff suggested that we needed to cover, and when realistically we only needed, there is a difference between a refund and a rebate. A refund is give all money back. A rebate is a certain dollar value. So we were looking at both options. In the end, their actual cost is going to be less than the other options, except for one customer. So what we should have just wrote the report as give them a refund for the full amount paid or none at all. That's what we should have worded. And that's what we're recommending in the end. But I wanted to cover all the options that staff suggested I needed to look at. So it's a refund, less administrative costs, or no refund at all.
And supplemental, if I may.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Therefore, I think I think it's probably prudent to give back the surplus of money. In other words, the refund. Unless I'm missing something here, there's no reason why we should be hanging on to other people's money. If the cost came in less than expected, there should be a refund that should go back to those proponents. Am I missing something with that thought?
Jason?
Yeah, so we're saying there are two neighbors side by side. One person we required to install a meter last year. And then we're going to go there this year and install a meter at his neighbor's property, and they got exactly the same property. So that's the fairness. Staff are recommending that we should give this person the money back just because the metering program wasn't underway yet, that they should get their money back. That's what we're saying. But we're going to not giving back the administrative cost because it costs staff time more to do their meter early, essentially, rather than under a big program.
Thank you. Alex, go ahead, please.
Yeah, through the chair. The only other consideration here would be that this is just for phase one. So these refunds are for those properties that fall under the parameter for phase one. Phase two may or may not move forward, which would be the residential portion or those properties under 5 acres of irrigation privilege. So that's the bridge we will cross later, but it is a consideration that some properties may be refunded this money for the meter, and some properties may not, depending on how and when phase two moves forward. So those properties may just end up paying for the meter regardless because of requirements in the files. But that's the only other consideration that I can see.
Okay, sorry here, I lost track. So I'll go to Director Watson. You supplemental, Director Vandenberg, are you okay? Okay, good. Director Watson, please go ahead.
Thank you. Two questions. The first one is just, I think procedurally, I figured it out at the beginning of the report where it says, who does this affect? It says all areas but area I. But then when you read the motion, it clarifies that it's specific to a financial plan that is specific to the water service. So I kind of answered the question by looking through that, but I was just wanting to make sure that all areas except for area I didn't quite understand that. And then my next question is related to the report indicates there is community works funding made available for this phase. And so what's occurring with that funding? Was it ever approved or was it not approved? And so it remains within whatever allocation it was set in.
Go ahead. Jason.
Yeah, so my fault. Instead of going to a brand new template, I just finished writing one report, so I resave as another thing. I should have corrected the front end. So it only affects areas B and C, this report. For the community works grant, there's $750,000 approved 2 years ago or 3 years ago around there for the metering.
Supplemental?
I didn't hear the answer. You guys spoke over each other, so I didn't hear what he said.
Just a sec.
The Community Works grant was granted 3 years ago and continues to be part of the project cost.
Thank you. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't quite understand what's occurring here, but obviously the grant funding is still being used, but then we're refunding what people have paid for the infrastructure because we're not installing the infrastructure.
For specific types of properties that are part of the phase one metering project. So it is not for smaller residential properties that may have installed meters previously. It is for specifically these 4 properties that would have been part of the phase one metering program that we are implementing, but did it early on their own cost. So we are reimbursing these 4 specific properties that meet the criteria that we apply for phase one metering.
Thank you. Final question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So the numbers indicated in recommendation 1, which is in the agenda as the one suggested, those numbers are the total amounts, not the per property amount. Is that correct?
Go ahead, Jason.
Some are still estimates, so the word is kind of weird. So some are actual costs and some are estimated costs still because they're not necessarily installed yet.
Sorry, the
That's
question was, is that per unit or is that for total? I'm not looking for the specifics on like to the penny. I'm just asking, is that per unit or total for that account?
Yeah, so we can't put addresses on there, so I used account. So there's 4 different values there. Those represent the actual cost or the estimated cost for those 4 properties. Some of them are waiting for meters or meter bits still, so they haven't been installed yet, but we gave them a cost estimate a while ago, sort of thing.
Is it understood or should I provide more explanation, Director?
Move along. It's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Weatherhead, please go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. I may be going way out on a limb here, but so forgive me if I am, but I think maybe Director Watson's question helped me a little bit more. This is pertaining to the grants, the ability to, or the non-ability to be able to give back to any of the users increased costs. I think that what I'm looking for here is just a bit more clarity on when I've given a grant for a water system. I'm not allowed to give it to individual residents and because I have all these rate holiday users that do not pay, in essence, any grant that I put toward any one of my water systems is going to go and supplement BC Hydro. And it's a Crown corporation, so I'm using Crown money to and I'm not happy with that structure. And so when I was reading this, it just brought me back to that, thinking, is there no way that I can ever help out my residents who are paid users on a system through any kind of refund or rebate or something ever? I know I've asked this before, but I'm still looking for some way to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, Uli, please go ahead.
Yeah, so the funding here is actually Community Works funding plus another senior government grant for a project. So these are not fundings for an individual. The only reason why we are discussing this item was that previously under our bylaw, these 4 properties were required when they applied to install a meter at their own cost. These meters are either installed or not yet installed, but they have paid deposits, and it is about returning these deposits as part of the overall project that was grant funded. that then installs meters to all of these properties, including, under phase one, including these 4 properties that previously paid from their own money for the meter install. So that's different from providing an individual. If an individual would come to us, apply for a connection, we would not be able to use Community Works funds for that individual.
It would be clear to say that we're not giving rebates with Community Works. We're doing it from reserves of this project. Phase one's metering will be funded from Community Works and reserves.
Yeah, we're good. We did that here. Yeah, I'm good.
Not even ask whether or not.
No, we differentiated that. So, supplemental, Director Weatherhead?
No, that's clear. Thank you.
Great. Could you lower your hand, please, just so I know if you call again, I can call on you. Director Tierney, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Really hard to hear the meeting room, but in any regard, I'd like to move the motion with the staff recommendation that we refund.
Yeah, can we have a seconder? Yeah, Director Jackman has seconded in the room. Now we'll open for discussion, and of course this is in the recommendation, and these are the refund amounts estimated that is not coming from Community Works funds. And it's, yes, so any further discussion? I'll pause for a moment. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing none, this will go forward to the board for approval. Thank you very much, everyone. So we will now, sorry you can't hear the boardroom as well as we would like. Perhaps we were mumbling. How is it right this exact moment when you listen to me, Director Tierney? Is it reasonable?
Yes, Chair, you're coming through loud and clear, and Uli is. It's really hard to hear the other stuff.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And it could be microphone distance and what have you. So thanks for that. We'll get others to yell and or really enunciate. So we'll move on to item number 6, which is water operations and capital project update. And we'll turn it over to staff. And I assume Alex will be taking this, but I don't know that for sure.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
So the intent of this report is to provide an update to the Water Services Committee and highlight larger maintenance and capital projects that have been completed to date. I'm not going to go through each line item, but we'll open it up to the floor if there's any questions or any clarification needed on any of the items below.
And I'll just highlight that certainly you can keep this in your proverbial or metaphorical back pocket, that when a person says, why are your rates so high? You can say, well, look at this capital maintenance from this period of time. Director Jackman, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, I just noted that there is, what's the exact wording here? There's renewed correspondence with the Sanka Beach Resort Cooperative Association. Can be offline, but I just would like to see that. I haven't copied on any of it. And maybe it would make sense to recall the advisory if there's something substantive in there. So I'm just curious what that's about. And I'm also remiss, general comment, because it's good to see the generators are going ahead. I'm curious what the estimated cost will be. And I'm remiss, I keep meaning to take a picture of the one at the Crawford Bay Health Clinic. It's a great, massive green box that services a building that's no bigger than the boardroom. And it's a mere $300,000 estimated cost under the Ontario Health Authority's budget. But so more seriously though, rough cost, seeing that generators are coming soon and that we have local electricians lined up and local staff doing some concrete pads, rough idea what, say, any of these generators are going to come in at?
For the Rindell one specifically?
Well, Randell or any of them typically.
They all vary because they all got different load demands on them. The Rindell one, I think we budgeted 70 or 80,000 for. I have to recheck the budget.
Jumped to 80. the chair, it's still around that.
Yes, yeah.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Thanks. Director Weatherhead, please go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair, to staff. On the Burton water system, requested quoting proposals for rehabilitation on the second well, and I know we just spent $50,000 up doing rehabilitating that well. So is this to do just with that long-term water quality advisory, or what other upgrades? I wasn't aware that we had more rehabilitation on that second well. Thank you.
Yeah, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair. So this is the other well, because the initial well that failed last year was shown through cammering to have significant issues with the well screens in both sediment accumulation and biofilm from certain iron oxidizing bacteria. To be proactive on the other wells, since they are so close in proximity and likely mimic each other in terms of wear and tear and other issues that might be present. We're going to rehab that well, and the pump is due for replacement as well. It's reached its expected life. So that's what that well is. That's what that line item is.
Thank you. Supplemental?
I guess it's going to be another costly venture. And again, I'm feeling really restricted to be able to fund through my community works when more than half of my funding goes toward supplementing BC Hydro. Thank you.
We'll continue to talk to staff about access to using your community works funds where you feel appropriate, for sure. If you could lower your hand, Director Weatherhead, that way I'll know if you have a supplemental. And how are we doing on the chat side?
Nobody since.
All right. Okay, well, now I'll go back to my agenda. Is there a motion, or is it just? No, just receipt. Okay, so I will, just before I go to public time and adjournment, is there anything, an issue, anything anyone would like to raise comment on while we're all here with water systems and money and fees and complications? Well, seeing none, we'll move to public time. Since there's any public.
There's one name I do not recognize online. Vita Turok, is that a member of the public or a director signed on with an alias?
There's residents of the RDCK also.
Yeah. Okay, so speak up. It's public time now, a little early, but we're close to adjournment. So if there is a comment, question you'd like to ask, please just unmute and ask. You don't have to, just the opportunity to. And I'll pause for another 5 seconds just to allow unmuting if necessary. Seeing none, no public time, I will ask for a movement of adjournment. We have so moved by Jackman, seconded. And is there any opposition? Seeing none, we are officially adjourned.
Thank you, Chair. Good meeting.
Thanks, everyone, for your
Thank
great questions, comments, insights, discussions, perspectives.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.